Love brings out the best in us, most of the time. However, there are, like any other rule, many exceptions. History has been laced with people doing outlandish things in the name of love. Renetta Alevi was known for having many lovers and admirers outside of her marriage. One man, wrought with jealousy, the veterinary surgeon Dr. Renzo Ferrari, decided the best thing to do to win Renetta's love was to take things to an extreme that no rational person would ever go to. When Renetta's husband, Tranquillo Alevi, came home one fateful August night in 1973, he was greeted with a typewritten letter and a bottle of aperitif, a sort of alcoholic Italian pre-dinner appetizer. The letter in question was an offer to represent a new and upcoming brand as their sales representative. As Tranquillo was a local farmer of great renown, this was not a new thing for him. Excited for another great opportunity, he opened the bottle, took a swig, and immediately dropped dead. It turns out the bottle in question was injected by syringe with 6 grams of strychnine, a very potent poison. It's worth noting that it takes about 2 milligrams of strychnine to consider it a lethal dose to a human being. The bottle he received would have had about 6,000 milligrams. It didn't take long for police to find the culprit, the aforementioned Dr. Renzo Ferrari, who had 6 days earlier purchased that exact amount of strychnine. What's more, they found out that he possessed the very typewriter used to type that false invitation. On November 18th, 2006, the Flemish Parachute Club set out for a regular skydiving excursion over Belgium. However, the events that followed would be anything but regular. Our players this time around are diving instructor Marcel Summers, 37-year-old Els Van Doren, and 22-year-old Els Klotmans. On that cold November day, the plan was to split the 12 members of the club into 3 groups of 4, in order to dive in hand-holding quartet formations. As Els Klotmans, Marcel Summers, and an unnamed male leapt from the plane, Mrs. Van Doren, Mr. Mark. Now, while a quartet is meant to be 4 people linked together by their hands as they free fell, 3 people can achieve the same outcome, so that is what happened. When it came time for Els Van Doren, diving by herself, to deploy her parachute, a tragedy occurred. Her first parachute was a bust, but armed with the knowledge that there was a backup chute, she had a moment of relief, but that moment was gone in a flash, as the second chute failed as well, and with nowhere to go but down, Els Van Doren lost her life that day. By all accounts of what happened, she fell 2 miles straight down, landing in a garden in rural Belgium. When the police realized that the strings were cut on both of her parachutes, foul play came to mind. Now, Mrs. Van Doren was in fact married, and with 2 children to boot, but that did not stop her from having an affair with Marcel Summers. So, like most foul play when it comes to a married person, the first suspect in mind was, of course, Mr. Van Doren. However, when they went to interrogate him, they were surprised to see just how surprised he was that his wife was having an affair. He was drained, empty, destroyed, now having to grieve over his dead wife and defiled marriage. And it was a marriage that was defiled by a man who wasn't even seeing only one woman. You see, Marcel Summers was also having an affair with Els Klotmans. Now, the weekend prior to her death, Marcel Summers, Els Van Doren, and Els Klotmans spent a weekend together. But something happened one night that would change their lives forever. Marcel had decided, very bluntly, that of the Els, it was Els Van Doren he wished to continue seeing, taking her to bed that night to do what lovers do. Once police caught wind that Marcel had also been involved with Els Klotmans, the next logical step was to question her. And it didn't take long to put 2 and 2 together, and eventually Els Klotmans was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of Els Van Doren. It seems that on that fateful night, after being spurned by her lover, Els Klotman used the opportunity of being alone to sever the strings on her rival's parachutes. And as a wise man once said, "Strange what desire will make foolish lovers do." And that man was Chris Isaak, with his 1989 hit, Wicked Game.
Nobody loves no one.
Hello, and welcome on back to Heard It in a Love Song, the show where we take a trip to the past to discover the history of a love song we all know and love. This week, we are taking a look into a song with a really great backstory. a lusty little tune by Chris Isaak, Wicked Game.
Please welcome the adorable Chris Isaak, everybody!
We start our story on June 26, 1956, in Stockton, California, about 90 miles east of San Francisco. That is where and when we meet up with forklift driver Joseph Isaak and his wife Dorothy, a potato chip factory production worker. These two are stationed at St. Joseph's Medical Center awaiting the birth of their third son, Christopher Joseph Isaak, new younger brother to Nick and Jeff. Although his blue-collar parents couldn't give Chris much by means of material goods, with him recalling to the Star, "My dad was an alcoholic, and we were always broke. I remember once we had nothing but a box of Bisquick and some string beans in the house. We ate them for 3 days, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What they could provide him with was something much more priceless, the love of music. Artists like Roy Orbison, Hank Williams, Dean Martin, Bing Crosby, and Elvis Presley.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
The sadder the songs, the better. With him stating later in that Star interview, I remember listening to the radio as a kid and finding that the sadder songs always made me feel more peaceful. Funny, but the more hurtin' the music was, the better it made me feel. He was particularly fond of Lonesome Town by Ricky Nelson.
And they call it Lonesome Town, where the broken hearts stay.
True to his word of the more hurtin' the music was, the better it made him feel. His love of music quickly transformed into a love for the radio, the only vehicle he had to find new music. So, like one does, he actually wired up the family's backyard with a very impressive setup, simply as a means to reel in radio stations from all over America and Canada. Telling the Boston Globe, "I listened to tons of stuff as a kid. I listened to the radio very late at night, laying in bed. And all through high school, people probably thought I was the world's sleepiest guy or just a dummy. During the first 3 classes each day, I would just sleep because I'd been up till about 4:30 or 5 listening to the radio." Despite that fact, Chris managed to be a class president for freshman, sophomore, and junior year at Amos Alonzo Stagg High School in North Stockton. Those 3 years as class president came to a head in his senior year when he was elected student body president. He juggled that title with the title of head cheerleader for the all-male cheerleading squad, with him gushing over that time to the Sacramento News and Review. "I made up cheers. Cheering was my first time performing before an audience. I loved it. And not just the attention. There was real joy. There was also joy when he graduated as valedictorian in 1974. After high school, Chris spent some time at the San Joaquin Delta College, transferring shortly thereafter to the University of the Pacific, where he studied filmmaking, English, and journalism. While in college, he spent some of his free time boxing, something that was a family trait, as his brothers and father before him also boxed. With him telling the Albuquerque Journal, "I come from a long line of boxers. Dad was a light heavyweight and he boxed in Golden Gloves and in prison. So when I grew up, my dad would teach us boxing. I boxed in college, and every great fighter has a nickname. Mine was Canvasback. I had great thoughts about being a boxer. Then one day, my brother said, 'Let's fight.' Of course, he's 6'8" and 300 pounds. Chris's pretty boy face was changed forever when his nose was broken, changing him from a baby-faced handsome boy to a rugged would-be crooner. A student exchange program in 1979 led Chris to living, studying, and boxing in Japan. And it was in Japan that he stumbled upon a compilation of Elvis songs from his studio sessions at Sun Studio in Memphis. Telling the Washington Post, "There was this Elvis song that really knocked me out called 'I'll Never Let You Go.'"
I'll never let you go, little darling.
I liked the song so much that I sang it, and I sang it, and I sang it. One day, the Japanese lady that lived downstairs from me started singing it too. She couldn't speak English, but she had learned it phonetically from me, and that's when I decided to give singing a try. By 1981, Chris made his way back to Stockton, finishing college and graduating with a degree in English and communication arts. But he didn't stay in Stockton long, deciding that there was no way he would get discovered there. So, he set his sights on San Francisco. "When I came down from Stockton, I was pathetic," he told the Washington Post. "I had this bright lime green suit with black velvet buttons. I thought that was how musicians dressed. I didn't really know. I kept going down to this nightclub and standing outside the door until they eventually said, 'Do you want to come in for free?' Then I'd go in, and I'd look for people who looked like someone that might want to be in my band." By some miracle, the man out of time he was, Chris found himself a manager, Mark Plummer.
I've had my share of lovers, some say I'm damn good.
and together they found people that did want to be in his band. James Calvin Wilsey on lead guitar, Roland Sally on bass, and Kenny Dale Johnson on drums, leaving Chris on rhythm guitar and vocals. They coined themselves Silvertone. It wouldn't take long for them to find their footing, playing shows at the Mabuhay Gardens, which was San Francisco's premier punk club at the time. For a year, the band bounced around from venue to venue, dive bar to dive bar, and everywhere in between, playing 50s and 60s covers, as well as some original Chris Isaak pieces, becoming very well liked in the Bay Area. Fate led them to gaining a fan with some real pull. Producer Eric Jacobson. Eric Jacobson was well known in the music business, having produced all the hits for the band The Lovin' Spoonful. Hits like
Hot town, summer in the city, back of my neck getting dirt and gritty.
The band struck up a friendship with Eric, and he decided that he would help them on their way to stardom. With Eric recalling to the Rolling Stone, "I was most impressed by his charisma and the audacity of what he was trying to do with his voice musically. He took a lot of chances." He got his foot in the door for the band at Warner Brothers Records. Deciding to just use the name Chris Isaak and not Silvertone, they released their first album, the aptly named Silvertone, in January of 1985. The nation's pop music critics were blown away by Silvertone, with Washington Post contributor Joe Safsey writing, "Chris Isaak's Silvertone is not only one of the most striking debut albums of the year, it's also one of the few albums of the 80s offering a thoroughly contemporary rock sound fashioned from America's musical roots." Despite the various bits of praise, with even some of it coming from Creedence Clearwater Revival's John Fogerty, when he described Chris Isaak as being like a skyscraper against the landscape and predicted that he would become a big star, Silvertone didn't do the numbers that they were hoping for. And that came as no surprise, with no songs being played on the radio and no videos being played on MTV, even though they did shoot one for Gone Ridin' and Dancin'. It's worth noting, however, that a relationship would be formed with Chris Isaak's music and a director who was on the brink of blowing up himself, David Lynch, as he chose 2 tracks from Silvertone, Gone Ridin' and Livin' for Your Lover, to be in his 1986 film Blue Velvet. His second album, the eponymously named Chris Isaak, was released in December 1986, but it failed to really do anything for Chris and the boys either. However, it did lead to a friendship with Roy Orbison, who sat in on some songwriting sessions with Chris before passing away from a heart attack in 1988. Again, a few tracks had music videos recorded that saw very little airplay. You Owe Me Some Kind of Love,
You owe me some kind of love.
And Blue Hotel.
Blue hotel on a lonely highway.
While those 2 albums were mediocre at best in terms of sales and chart positions, they did draw comparisons from critics and fans alike to that of Elvis and Roy Orbison, which Chris, while flattered, did not ultimately agree with, telling the Boston Globe, "When you compare somebody to Roy Orbison or Elvis, it's like parking a speedboat next to the Queen Mary. What I do is nice, but I'm not trying to compare to those guys, because it makes my work look tiny. I have hopes that if I keep working hard, someday I'll have a couple of songs that'll add something to music, but I'd drive myself crazy if I thought I had to be like Elvis or Orbison, because I just don't think it's possible. Those guys are once in a generation." After 2 flops, Chris and the band decided that they needed some time to recoup, reconfigure, and work on something a bit different. Something they could really see being huge with both fans and critics. They returned in 1989 with their 3rd album, Heart-Shaped World, and despite a few videos being shot, namely for Don't Make Me Dream About You
Don't make me dream about you.
and Blue Spanish Sky,
It's a big blue Spanish sky.
it seemed that the 3rd time was almost certainly not going to be the charm. But everything changed in 1999 with a phone call from David Lynch. David Lynch was finishing up his latest film, Wild at Heart, and he was missing a key piece: music to underlay a driving scene with Nick Cage and Laura Dern. And David, being a fan of Chris Isaak from the jump, got the idea to use an instrumental version of a song that he very much adored. That song being this week's topic, Wicked Game.
The world was on fire and no one could save me but you.
While the exposure from that instrumental version generated a little buzz, it created a hive of excitement in Atlanta's Power 99 DJ/music director Lee Chestnut. Wild at Heart, now a cult classic, was about as popular as Chris's first 2 albums when it was released, but somehow Lee managed to see it a handful of times in theaters before it was pulled. He became transfixed with the song, deciding he had to find out more about it, and to his delight, he found out that it was actually a song with vocals. Elated, he threw Wicked Game into heavy rotation, and soon thereafter, Chris released it as a single, and it snowballed into a massive success, becoming an American top 10 hit in January 1991 and reaching number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it Chris Isaak's first real hit. The single became a number 1 hit in Belgium and reached the top 10 in Canada, Finland, Ireland, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Sweden. With that success around the globe, Wicked Game sold over 1 million copies. And when talking about the man that made this all possible, David Lynch, in an interview with Huffington Post's Mike Ragagna, Chris said, "I enjoy talking about David Lynch because he's such a great guy. The question I get about him is, how is David Lynch? Is he scary or spooky or something? I don't think it's ever the guys who make films like David makes, or who have that kind of weird bend in their artwork. Those guys are probably the nicest guys in real life because they've expressed all their weird angles. The guys you have to watch for are the guys who go, I'm a scoutmaster, the proud father of 2 children, and I'm also a deacon in the church. Then you go, be careful. If he's out there in the backyard at night with a shovel, be careful because he's burying something." The next logical step was to film a music video, and 2 videos were cut. The more popular one was directed by photographer Herb Ritz, who you may recall from the Underneath Your Clothes episode, which if you've not seen that, the link will be below. He also directed
Let it blow, let it blow, let it blow. Cherish, cherish. Don't let me be the last to know.
Filmed in Hawaii at what was formerly known as Kamoamoa Beach and Hawaii Volcanoes National Park on the Big Island, the video, as romantic as it seems, was actually hell for model Helena Christensen, who appears opposite of Chris, with her recalling in an interview to Glamour, "To be completely honest, and this might ruin the romantic notion of the video, my legs were bleeding from the knees down, because I was running on black lava and it was cutting into my skin. So, not so glamorous and sexy at all. But who cares? It was worth it." In I Want My MTV, the uncensored story of the music video revolution by Rob Tannenbaum and Craig Marks, Chris remarked, "I like the fact that I don't get the girl. She's not kissing me. She's kind of ignoring me through the whole video, and that kind of matches the song, which is, you know, I'm in love with you, but you're playing me." The video was nominated for 6 and won 3 awards at the 1991 MTV Music Video Awards. It was nominated for Video of the Year, losing out to
Losing my religion.
as well as Best Direction in a Video, again losing out to
Losing my religion.
and Best Editing in a Video, losing out to. It won for Best Male Video, Best Video from a Film, and Best Cinematography.
Oh, the winner is Chris Isaak, Wicked Game. Chris Isaak is on location filming the Twin Peaks movie in Seattle. Let's go there now live via satellite.
Really happy you won for Best Video for a Film, Wild at Heart. But really, it's David Lynch who deserves the credit. And I could talk about it, but I'd rather talk to somebody who was in Wild at Heart. And what was it like working with David on Wild at Heart, Kyle?
Chris, I wasn't in Wild at Heart. He didn't ask me to do that.
And the winner is Chris Isaak. All right, now we're going to Seattle, the Twin Peaks set where Chris Isaak is. Standing by, come on.
Hey, my thanks to everybody. I'm very happy to win this award. Particularly, I want to thank David Lynch, who got the ball rolling. My band, who I think it'll come as a surprise to them that I won for male in the video. I don't think they realized there was a male in the video. Herb Ritz and Helena and the people at Reprise. And I would have loved to pick it up myself, but I'm here on location at the Twin Peaks movie and hanging out with my friend Kyle MacLachlan, and he'll be here in a little bit and just hang out with us and talk. We're really good buddies now. He's left?
Another video was commissioned for the Wild at Heart VHS release and was directed by David Lynch himself. It features scenes of Lula, Laura Dern, and Sailor, Nicolas Cage, from the film. interspersed with black and white footage of Chris Isaak and the band performing the song. Wicked Game is a tale of obsessive love, and when Chris Isaak spoke to Songfacts about the late night event which inspired the song, he said, "This one I wrote really late at night, and it was written in a short time because I remember that a girl had called me and said, 'I want to come over and talk to you.' And talk was a euphemism. And she said, 'I want to come over and talk to you until you're no longer able to stand up.' And I said, 'Okay, you're coming over.' And as soon as I hung up, I thought, oh my God, I know she's going to be trouble. She's always been trouble. She's a wildcat. And here I am. I'm going to get killed. But I'm doing this." And I wrote Wicked Game. World's on fire and no one could save me but you. So you start thinking about it, and by the time she came over to the house, I had the song written. And I think she was probably upset because I was more excited by the song. I was like, yes, you're gorgeous, baby. But listen to this song. The song inspired someone you may be surprised would be inspired by a song like this. Metallica frontman James Hetfield, who admitted that Wicked Game was the vocal inspiration for their 1991 hit, The Unforgiven.
So I dubbed the
And it inspired a lot of other artists, namely to cover the song, including
strange what desire will make foolish people do.
I never dreamed that I'd be somebody like you.
I never dreamed that I knew somebody like you.
You know I don't wanna fall in love.
No, I don't wanna fall in love with you.
Wicked Game comes in at 113 beats per minute. The word otherworldly gets thrown around a lot, but in the case of Wicked Game, I think it's extremely fitting. There is an air of magic to it. The guitar work is weepy and romantic, and it really draws you in the way that that woman drew Chris in the night that he wrote the song itself. We've all had a love that made us feel like even if the world was on fire, their love could save us. We would do anything for them, because desire makes fools of us all. This week's Love Homework is another song about being wrapped around someone's finger to a point that you don't care what's going on around you. Die by Stella Donnelly.
I don't wanna die, I'm looking forward, but you're falling behind.
And that's it, the end of another love song history lesson. If you like what you learned, and you'd like to continue learning, subscribe, hit the bell, drop a like below, and join me again next week for the history of a love song we all know and love. Until next time, remember, nobody loves no one. And remember, you heard it in a love song.
Loitering on cliffs, thinking about stuff like screwing you on the beach at night.